I want to demonstrate to you the problems that we have in the Republican Party. Specifically in the Senate. You know, there's been a ton of focus on the House and the election for the Speaker and so forth. But Mitch McConnell doesn't get that kind of an examination. Not in talk radio, not on television, not in the conservative press. And he should. Because he's diabolical, he's evil. And he does more to undermine the conservative agenda than anybody else I can think of on the Republican side. But he's been in Washington for decades and decades, like his buddy Biden and these other guys, so they have built up alliances and friendships within the Republican establishment, within the Democrat establishment, even within the media. This is the ruling class. So he hates Rick Scott, because Rick Scott dared to run against him. Even though Rick Scott knew he couldn't win, he got 10 votes, including his own vote. And he should have gotten more, because I think the Republicans in that Senate Republican conference, some of whom ran as conservatives for their current seats, but have not revealed who they voted for. We haven't heard from Ted Budd. We haven't heard from J.D. Vance. We haven't heard from any of these guys. I don't know who they voted for to this day. But Mitch McConnell is out to destroy now Rick Scott. Because Rick Scott, who's been a governor twice of a huge state like Florida, who is an incredibly successful businessman in a multi-billion-dollar company, he challenges Mitch McConnell, and you're not allowed to do that. Like Ron Johnson has. You're not allowed to do that. Like Mike Lee has. You're not allowed to do that. So Mitch McConnell is petty. Mitch McConnell is power hungry. Mitch McConnell's all about himself. So is his staff. Ex-staff and current staff. Rick Scott put out a plan without the approval of Mitch McConnell, and the plan was how to basically reform Washington and the federal government from the bottom up and the middle out, as the head case Biden likes to say. And one of the things he said is that programs should be sunset every 5 years, so Congress is forced to review them and look at them and so forth. So the Democrats and Biden have seized on that to say that the Republicans want to eliminate Social Security and Medicare. Mitch McConnell's been in the Senate a very, very long time. He's been in leadership for 20 years. He's also the longest-serving Republican leader in the Senate in history. In fact, he's the longest-serving leader of either party in history. And why? Is he that good? Mitch McConnell hasn't done a thing to help Social Security and Medicare because the trustees have said they're going under, both of them. And that if something isn't done, then in 10 or 12 or 13 years, there'll be massive tax increases on individuals who pay into it, and there'll be massive benefit reductions to Social Security recipients and Medicare recipients. I touched this for about 14 seconds the other day, and the George Soros Marxist operation called Media Matters attacked me. Did you see that, Mr. Producer? Essentially saying I favor getting rid of Social Security. So that's why it's difficult to even raise it. But something is going to happen because Washington has already stolen the funds out of the trust funds. There are no funds in the trust funds. You get a letter from the Social Security Administration telling you how much is in there. You don't have anything in there. Washington took the money out of the Social Security trust funds, both of them, took the money out of the Medicare trust fund, took the money out of the highway trust fund. They don't have any trust funds in Washington, D.C., because they've all stolen the money. And if they were in the private sector, every one of these bastards would go to prison for the rest of their lives. Every one of them. So what their mouthpieces have to say to try and politicize all this is beside the point. But Rick Scott was not proposing anything to Social Security and Medicare. Anything. He was making statements about how the government should work, right? So Mitch McConnell sees his opportunity to try and destroy Rick Scott. He knows Rick Scott's from a state that has many, many, many seniors, Florida. He knows Rick Scott has presidential ambitions, and Mitch McConnell considers himself the power player. He doesn't want Trump. He doesn't want Scott. He'll decide who the Republican nominee will be. He'll decide who the Republican nominees will be in all the Senate races. Because Mitch McConnell's really smart. He's got his buddy, Karl Rove there telling him what to do. Karl Rove was wrong all the time. And we lost the Senate in 2006. Guys like Santorum and so forth. When he was deputy chief of staff to George Bush. So here it goes. Cut 9, go.
Well, unfortunately, that was the Scott plan. That's not a Republican plan. That was the Rick Scott plan. The Republican plan, as I pointed out last fall, if we were to become the majority, there were no plans to raise taxes on happy.
All right, stop. There were no plans, period. He ran on nothing, and we lost the Senate. And he blames Trump, and he blames MAGA Republicans. And now he's blaming Rick Scott. This is Mitch McConnell. This is how he stays into power. If they only want to listen to me, I better tell them. They didn't run on no taxes. They didn't run on anything. It was every man and woman for him or herself. This guy's not some kind of political genius. He's a sleazeball. He's evil. And he'll spend millions and millions of dollars to trash conservative Republicans in order to elect people like Murkowski, who will endorse him for his current spot. So he's trying to make an example of Rick Scott. Don't ever challenge me. How do I know this? Because senators have told me he's like a mobster. He'll call you into his office. He'll tell you that he knows exactly what you're up to, that he has ways of hearing what you're talking about and saying about him. And he threatens them on committee assignments, on not giving them any money in the Republican primaries and so forth. That's what he does. He can't communicate with the American people. The guy has an outrageously bad ability to speak. He's not strategic. He can throw a wrench here and there, but any Republican leader can. Bob Dole was a great Republican leader in the House. Not because he agreed with everything Bob Dole said, but he knew how to run the place, in the Senate, excuse me. Go ahead.
Medicare or Social Security. So it's clearly the Rick Scott plan. It is not the Republican plan.
So he said Rick Scott's name 3 times. 3 times. Cut 10, go.
I mean, it's just a bad idea. I think it will be a challenge for him to deal with this in his own reelection in Florida, a state with more elderly people than any other state in America.
There you go. He wants to take out Rick Scott, a conservative. That's what he wants to do. The Democrats don't do this to their own members. You would never hear Schumer saying that about anybody. You would never have heard Pelosi or Hakeem Jeffries saying that about anybody. Mitch McConnell votes frequently on major bills where he's in the minority with a handful of Republicans that will follow him off the cliff. Mitch McConnell voted for inflation, too. Mitch McConnell voted for inflation, too, on massive spending. Infrastructure, where the vast majority of that money wasn't for infrastructure. It funded left-wing organizations and left-wing programs. He voted for that. Remember? Mitch McConnell voted for the omnibus bill. 18 of them did. He led the way. Look at this bridge behind me. I got a bridge here. What a jerk. So we can't just blame the Democrats for inflation, unfortunately. There's at least 18 Republicans who voted for massive inflation and who voted to put the Republican majority in the House in a true bind when it comes to this debt ceiling issue. That's McConnell. And so he's going to try and take out Rick Scott. He will leak stuff to major papers in Florida, major papers in Washington, D.C., because that's how the man operates in the shadows. He's very evil and sleazy. This is what we're up against. We're up against the forces that reject our entire founding, the forces that reject really what is the nature of Western civilization. These are throwbacks, in many ways, to the dark ages of thinking. If you don't agree with them, they accuse you of things. It's why it's important that we have on our side people who understand this. Mitch McConnell doesn't. Mitch McConnell is a petty, pathetic, old, long in the tooth, lazy man who gets excited when he's trying to destroy other Republicans or conservatives. He's enriched himself, as has his family, enormously in ways that have not been fully investigated. But there are some Republicans who understand this. One of them is the governor of Florida. The governor of Florida engages in this culture war. That's why they hate him. That's why other Republicans hate him, because they don't have the guts.